With us today is Victorious da Costa. He's a first-generation American with Afro-Latino roots. He was born in Brooklyn. His family comes from Panama and Guyana. He is a filmmaker. He is coming out with a documentary now called Digging for Weldon Irvine. And he is with us today to discuss his documentary, what it's all about, what his American dream is, and what he sees what's going on in the world as a filmmaker. Victorious, welcome, and welcome to the Brad Show Live. I appreciate your time. Where are you right now?
Right now, I'm in Brooklyn.
You're in Brooklyn, New York, downtown Brooklyn. Okay, so you're producing a documentary on Weldon Irvine. He's a music producer. Can you tell us a little bit about this film?
Yes, well, Weldon Irvine, he was a composer, arranger. He was one-time musical director of Miss Nina Simone for some years. He was born on the campus of Hampton University, and Weldon was the mentor to a lot of jazz artists that people would know, like Billy Cobham, Marcus Miller, Lenny White, and also hip-hop artists like Mos Def and Q-Tip. And Weldon also was an activist. He was politicized since the 60s, obviously being born in the Jim Crow era South, and his stint with Nina Simone.
When was he born? What era are we talking about with him?
1943.
1943. And when did he get into the music business?
He got into the music business in 1965.
And what was his first big hit? What was his first breakout thing?
His first big hit was Nina Simone's "To Be Young, Gifted, and Black," which was 1968. So he wrote that his first year working with Nina, and so he had those political leanings from the beginning. And Weldon, sadly, he committed suicide in 2002. Oh my
gosh! Was he active in the civil rights movement in the 60s?
As an artist.
As an artist.
As an artist. So music like "To Be Young, Gifted, and Black." He had an album called "Liberated Brother." So his art was always geared towards, radical, revolutionary equality.
So what drove you to tell his story and tell us, other than being a successful composer, what was interesting about his life?
Well, my executive producer, Joe Cavacino, told me that I reminded him of Weldon Irvine through the years. I never couldn't get his name right, Weldon Irvine.
Right. I had the same problem. Problem.
And I'm not a jazz fan. At least I wasn't a jazz fan. But what it is that I went and just looked up his story after some years, and it was the tragedy of him being an unsung hero, and then it's how he went out. So he wrote over 500 compositions. He has a lot of songs and mentees that are household names, household songs, but we don't know who he is.
Correct.
And that's a sad, and I think that's pretty much a lot of our story. You know, those of us who maybe push the stories of others, like you're doing right now, out into the world, and that may be a big part of our gift, but never really getting our shine.
He was by all accounts extraordinarily successful and completely unknown. Yes. Successful as an artist, maybe not monetarily, maybe not
monetarily, not at all.
Right. So, how long did it take you to make this documentary?
I'm still making it. I'm on my third year now, about 2.5 years in, and I'll be done in July. Knock on wood.
So what takes so long? Because people out there maybe are interested in making a movie, or maybe interested in following this path. Why does a documentary take, for example, 3 years to make, and maybe a comedy movie out of Hollywood they film in 6 months?
Well, documentary, depending on the level that you're doing it, and also depending if you're dealing with, let's say, a subject matter versus actual person, two different things. So with me, it took about half a year to really getting good with his family, and to get some of the archives and get people to trust me enough to open the doors to me. When you're indie, fundraising also is a thing. I started out of pocket, and so that slows things down, but I didn't want to wait until I got funding. So these are some of the things that it takes. And editing is a lot. So
it took you a long time to convince the family to trust you, that you're going to make their, whether you were talking to his children or maybe a girlfriend or spouse or a brother or sister. I'm not sure who you were speaking to in the family, but I guess it took them a long time to trust you that you would make Weldon and put him in the proper light that he deserves. Why do you think they were so protective of him?
Well, one, people tried before. People tried a couple of times to do something on Weldon.
Right.
Also, Weldon was very protective of himself. You know, he owned all of his publishing. He owned all of his music, and so he didn't really trust. He didn't have a manager. He didn't really trust outsiders, too much himself. And then Weldon he committed suicide, and so there was a wound that I was opening up.
Right.
That people just hadn't thought about him. Or, not fair to say, people hadn't really been talking about him for a lot of years, or talking about what happened. And here I come out of nowhere, knocking on the door. Can you please expose your life? So that's pretty tough.
Yeah, I understand. So what would you say, you're finishing the film now, would you say would be the theme of his life, or the theme of the film that you're trying to, is there a message from the film or a theme of the film, regarding his life?
The theme of Weldon's life is music is the key. That was his whole thing. Music is the key. The theme of this film, a big part of this film is mental wellness. Because we don't shy away from the suicide, and we look at the darkness that was in Weldon's life that helped him to create the music that he did, as an outlet. And then we go into trying to figure out, well, why did he do it, and what are the warning signs that you can see in artists in regards to perhaps being suicidal. So that's a mental wellness is a big part of this.
Isn't that a theme a lot also with a lot of the jazz greats, right? They all suffered a lot, and the suffering came out in their music. I think that's a general theme of jazz.
That's a great thing you just said, because unlike a lot of people in jazz, they're typically, who might use alcohol or heroin, back in that era, Weldon was clean. Weldon
Right.
didn't drink, smoke, from majority of his life. So it's like, well, where is it going? Where is all that energy going? What is his release? And he didn't really have one.
Mm-hmm. And it's bottled up to eventually what was a suicide.
Right. So when he did jazz, he didn't write jazz for people who love jazz. And my documentary isn't like a jazz lover's documentary.
Right.
It just so happens that this is a person who was a musician, but we go a lot into his life and his legacy.
I understand. Is this your first film, or you've done other films as well?
It's my first feature-length film. So,
How did you get into the film business? How did you decide to get into the film business, that this is what you want to do in life?
I did music for a lot of years, music business for a lot of years, but film was my first love. I have scripts that I wrote when I was in junior high school. Mm-hmm. My father had tons of movies, either VHS or analog reel, and it just was very natural to me, very natural step to me.
Are you enjoying the filmmaking process? Because it is a big chunk of your life, 2.5, 3 years. What is it that you're enjoying? Is there any part that you said, I could deal without this part of it?
Well, it's funny, on my screen is a picture that's coming up of Dr. Sam Wayman, who is Nina Simone's brother. The most enjoyable part of this film is I've been amassing a lot of elders, and I've never really had elders before. Mm-hmm. And that's just a good part, just finding a lot of people who have lived these lives, and beyond them knowing Weldon Irvine, they just have so much information and so much love to give me.
So where can somebody come and see this film or follow you to the film's completion? Where do you think this film is going to be shown? Tell us about, completed film and where we can see all this and how we can follow this to the end. Okay,
so the film will be done by July, and I'm looking for a November release. Mm-hmm. And I'm crossing my fingers for Doc NYC Film Festival in New York. But you can keep in touch with us at the website, weldonirvinefilm.com, and that's WeldonIrvine film.com. Also on Instagram, at Weldon Irvine Film. But look out for November.
And you do have an immigration story, your first generation, born in Brooklyn. Tell us about your parents' immigration story.
So my father, who was Weldon's age actually, he was born in Panama. Mm-hmm. His father was born in Jamaica. Mm-hmm. And his father was part of the people from the Caribbean who came over to build the Panama Canal. So that's where that family comes from.
Right.
My mother's family, they come from British Guyana. And they were there, as I imagine, as long as slavery existed in that region. And so my father came to live in 1970. My mother came here to live in 1966 in North America.
And how did they meet? How did
a
a man from Panama meet a woman from Guyana?
They met at a roller skating rink in Brooklyn, because in Brooklyn now, New York is the melting pot.
Right.
In my neighborhood, Flatbush and Crown Heights is like the Caribbean melting pot. So you'll get people from Haiti to Jamaica to anywhere, and so my generation is the first of children who have this multi-Caribbean background.
So your father was Panamanian. It's a completely different culture. It
Yes.
speaks Spanish than British Guyana. Although Panama, Central America, Guyana is obviously South America.
Right.
What heritage did you kind of galvanize to more or feel more part of growing up?
Well, some of your viewers can look at my colors and they can see that I have the red, white, and blue of Panama today. I would say Panama definitely, because the relationship between a boy and his father is as such. But I am able to go in between both worlds a bit flawlessly. I've been to both countries a lot. I bought some land in Guyana, but I definitely leaned towards Panama, if only because there weren't a lot of Panamanians in my particular neighborhood.
Right.
And having that Latino background or heritage, it unfortunately it made me feel more special than other people, which is one of the detriments of having that duality.
So Victorious, tell us a little bit about each of these photos as they come up.
This photo is myself, I believe 8 years old. Well, I'm in my uncle and aunt's house. This is my father. It's our Spanish leagues, athletics. My father was actually a famous baseball player in Panama before he came here. So this is his identification for the league that he played with. He played baseball really from the 50s into the early 70s. In Panama, he came here and he played a bit. He got scouted for the Padres. He was injured a little bit before that, and he, like most folks, he blew a shot, and that was it. This is his visa. I think that the first time that he came to the United States, my grandmother already lived here. She actually was working for the Alexander Sachs family. Alexander Sachs, who was the guy who brought the Einstein letter to FDR about nuclear war. So
right, he's the one who started the Manhattan Project during World War II.
He is, and my grandmother was apparently his housekeeper.
Oh, that's
maybe that's a film there, right?
Right, that's another film. I mean, you have lots of films already going through your head.
This is my father's certificate of appreciation. My father got his citizenship by serving in the armed forces, which is how one of the ways they get you.
Yes, if you served in the armed forces during military combat for 1 year, you can apply for automatic citizenship.
Right. He was a Korean War.
He was a Korean War vet.
Era.
Right.
Oh, pardon me. Excuse me. He was a Vietnam War era.
Right. Right.
Era,
so if you were in the military at any time, you didn't have to go to Vietnam just by you could have been peeling potatoes in Indiana for all the government knew, but as long as it was wartime, you would become a citizen. We always ask everybody before the end of our show, because we're all about helping people to achieve their American dream. What is one person's American dream is maybe not somebody else's. An American dream means something different to each person. Tell me what you think. Growing up as a first-generation American, you're a filmmaker who's documenting somebody who lived a tortured life here in America, who otherwise should have been at least financially more successful than they were, but was certainly artistically successful and had a tragic end to his life. Tell me what you think the American dream should be, and whether you're living it and whether you've achieved it. So a mouthful.
Cool, I can do that. No, I can do that. And as you're speaking, talking about Weldon's tragic ending, I have 6 friends that killed themselves, so it's very personal to me. But I'll tell you this, my mother told me that when she was in Guyana, when she was 10, before she came, she was told that the streets in America were paved with gold. And this was told to her literally, and she interpreted it literally. So for me, the American dream is the freedom to define that gold for yourself and for your family, and the freedom to obtain that goal. And that's pretty much it. Freedom to define and obtain that goal.
Well, very well said. That's good. Very well said. Victorious da Costa, Best of luck on your documentary. It sounds really interesting. I look forward to watching it when it's completed, and congratulations on very hard work in putting this together. I mean, a substantial amount of your life, 2.5, 3 years to do this, to devote to this man and this film. Congratulations to you, and I appreciate you coming on our show. Thanks.